Welcome to Spirit Level, the podcast that explores spirit, mystery, inspiration, and the ancient art of divination through the lens of modern living. I'm Jamie.
And I'm Fiongal.
And we're your hosts. In this podcast, we have a mix of guest speakers asking what spirituality means to them, talking heads between Fiongal and me, our experiences, what's helped us along our paths, and what could inspire you, and maybe some meditations along the way. And we are back! Episode
4. We were saying 6.
Who knows?
Can't wait for it to be over.
Yeah, fun. How are you?
I'm all right. I think I'm all right. I feel like things are shifting and changing. I think particularly in my own work and the way that I'm working, but I don't know what it's looking like yet. I think a lot of this happened when I was really ill, which I spoke about on episode 1. And I think after that, I remember having a sitting with somebody. I was being given the reading. And they were just saying, we both kind of concluded that I was going to come back to the work, but I'd be working in a slightly different way. And that hasn't fully presented itself. So it's weird because I know something's coming, but I don't know in what shape or what form. So in some ways it's quite exciting, but some ways it's a little bit daunting. Yeah, it's interesting. And I think also within the Wellness Foundry, I'm starting to try to loosen my grip a little bit because I've been running it on my own I say on my own, I've had an amazing team, but I've been at the helm, let's say, for the past 5 years. And then you've come on and it's almost a year to the day, right? That you've joined the team. So that's been a big shift. And just, I suppose, getting used to relinquishing some control is kind of weird because very often I think nothing's happening within the company. And then occasionally you'll turn around and say, oh, we got this, and this.
Well, and even for me to think it's been a full year working on this, it's like, wow, that has gone so quickly.
It has gone fast.
Learned so much, come so far, yet actually not properly recognised that.
Yeah. And
like, it has been a massive, massive shift going from well, now it's just full-time. I have a full-time job. But just going for, and how the work has increased from like both on the business side and the client side, like really kind of stepped up. Like my bookings I'm busy now with I've got my own client base, like regular returning clients, which when I think about, a year ago when I started doing readings professionally, I never thought never expected to get to this place.
It's so important, isn't it, that we recognise this? Because we can just be that hamster on the wheel and you're just running like mad because it is kind of what's required. But it's one of those big ironies that never escapes me that we're running a wellness business and, we just have to make sure that we're... Well, exactly, exactly.
So in this episode, one thing that we were reflecting on with our team is that we don't have too much information on our website about what it is to be a medium. And we were going to try and address that. And we thought that would be a really good topic to talk about, the difference between, because I think we've talked quite a bit about being psychic and what that involves, but we've never really gone into depth about what it means to be a medium or to have a mediumistic reading. So we will obviously look at some of the differences between psychic and medium, but I just thought this would be a really good option for us to delve deeper into the world of mediumship.
It's interesting, and I suppose this episode's also come because both of us are starting to step into that world a little bit more. I think up until 6 months ago, really, occasionally mediumship would come through and I would accept that and present evidence. But I think now I'm bringing it in almost every reading now.
I'm not. I am still very much going through phases with it. I think sometimes it's very, very strong and other times it's not. So it's nice in a way because I'm trusting that the information that's coming through is right for them at the time. But what I'm realizing is when it is coming through, I'm not pushing it away. I think at the beginning I was a bit fearful of it, thinking,
Agreed.
what if I don't get this right? What if
Same.
it doesn't land right? Now I'm just trusting that, okay, if I've really got a clear sense of this man with wispy hair and glasses and a pipe or whatever, I'm just going to say it.
Yeah.
And, you know, most of the time it lands. And if it doesn't, then that's fine as well.
Yeah, I think you're 100% right. It is the confidence thing. I think the more you do this work, the more you're able to trust it, the more you're able to bring through people that, it's a much kind of simpler way. So, question for you, what is mediumship?
Well, I suppose in the simplest form, it is... Okay, so if I was to think of mediumship back in the day, I would think of somebody coming on platform, picking somebody out of the audience and giving them a reading. I feel like mediumistic readings.
So what's platform?
So platform is a stage where one person, a medium, stands on with a group of people and depicts messages, receives messages and depicts audience members for that message.
Picks, not depicts.
Why?
Depicts is to paint a picture of.
Oh, okay.
This is Vocabulary Corner by Fiongal Greenlaw.
What's new?
Well,
Jesus.
if you're going to use words, at least use them correctly.
Yeah, I suppose that was a bit wrong.
So platform mediumship, yeah, exactly. The medium stands on stage, and it's usually that kind of, I've got a woman here who had problems with her arms or something, and they would kind of go, I'm drawn to this, to you over there.
Usually a piece of evidence about how they passed is the first thing. So definitely looking at that key piece of evidence, 1, 2 or 3 pieces of evidence about that person, so that that person in the audience knows that you are connected to whoever that might be.
Yeah.
However, for me, this is where it all gets a bit confusing, because although I will get sometimes a visual, a sense of somebody or a feeling, or I will just know and start talking, I still am not always sure as to whether I am bringing messages through from that spirit or whether I'm bringing it through psychically. I think for me, that line is quite blurred.
Okay.
In some way.
Yeah.
And I find it difficult to say whether I'm working mediumistic. I feel like I'm always working, because we're always working with spirit. And I think this is where I get a bit confused with this line. And I don't feel like, for me, I don't feel it's necessary to say particularly. I feel like I'm working with something outside of myself from a higher place. And whether I'm tuning in psychically and just getting these messages, or ultimately whether that's coming through a thread of spirit or guides, for me, it's almost irrelevant.
Yeah, I agreed. I agreed to some degree with that, for sure. In terms of, you know, sometimes I get clients sitting in front of me and they say, how does this work? And I'm kind of saying, to be honest, I don't really know myself, only in so much as I'm not sitting there figuring out the mechanics of it. It's a bit like being in a car. To be a good driver, you don't need to know what's going on underneath the bonnet. For instance, bit of a crap analogy, but it will do. And actually, if I get too caught up in what's going on underneath the bonnet, that's where my focus is, in rather than steering the wheel and making sure that the car's driving forward. So yeah, that's kind of and because it's such a blend and such a mix of, well, it's going to be partly my guides talking to me, it's going to be your guides talking to me, I'm going to be picking up on information from you, all of that stuff.
But I suppose the difference is, it's just making me think, is that if someone specifically comes to a reading because they want to connect with a loved one, somebody that's passed, that is a slightly different way of working.
Yes and no.
But then we can't always promise that person is going to be there either. That's the difficult part, isn't it?
So I suppose the big difference is, when we're working psychically, we're working, I suppose in the strictest sense of the word, when we're working psychically, we are picking up on the information of you. So
yes.
We spoke last episode about the auric field. So that's very psychic. If I'm picking up on the fact that you're stressed within your work at the moment, that's psychic. If I'm picking up on the fact that you've got a twinge in your right leg, that's working psychically, because that's the information that is emanating from you as a person.
Yeah.
And I do get what you mean. It starts to get a bit blurry with mediumship because I suppose under the strictest sense of the word, mediumship is when we are communicating with another consciousness that isn't ours. And our guides are included in that. But there are psychics out there that work with their guides but don't work mediumistically because they don't work with those loved ones who have passed or those ancestors that have passed. But I suppose, if you're working with guides, you are working mediumistically in a certain way. What I would say is that not all psychics are mediums, but pretty much all mediums are psychic. Again, there's exceptions to that rule. It's not strictly of true, don't write letters. But pretty much...
Most of the time,
because the training that is required in order to become a medium is something that you'll have naturally developed your psychic senses anyhow. Typically, and again, this isn't always the strictest, there's a bit of a rough rule of thumb, but it doesn't always apply. There's always exceptions. It takes much longer to train as a medium as it does as a psychic. It's usually harder.
Yes.
It's usually harder.
But then all of our training was,
a mix.
It was a mix, but heavily, mediumistic.
Yeah.
In a way, like our tutor is definitely a very, very, very good medium. So we've had that kind of training. It's just funny that for some reason with me, maybe it is the way that we've been taught. It's just never been this kind of strict rule of thumb with it in some degree. Like I think we can play around with that. Do you know what I mean?
I think so. Yeah, in some ways it's not helpful to pick it apart and put labels on things and going, this is what's happening, this is what's happening. But so too, is it sometimes helpful to label things, to clearly distinguish, I've got somebody here. To be able to work in that very succinct, clear way brings a certain succinctness to the client as well. So if I start a reading by going, I've got somebody here, feels like a grandfather energy, used to be a baker. Mm-hmm. If they're able to go, yeah, that's my granddad, great. So for that reason, it's quite helpful to be like, boom, boom, boom. In terms of where the message is coming from, again, sometimes that is very important. I think you're right in terms of sometimes there'll be grandmother whispering things in our ears and we haven't recognised that it's grandmother saying this, but it's really helpful advice, so we're saying it anyway. But actually, there have been times in my sittings where I've gone, your grandmother's saying this, I don't think it's particularly great advice, but she wants me to say it, so it is very much her point of view. But she is saying you need to move house where you're living is not aligned at all. Yeah. Whereas actually my spirit and my guides might be saying, hold on for a while. It's offering you stability and security. So it's important. And that's the other thing to distinguish is that when we're working mediumistically, because we're working with the consciousness of a past one or a loved one, it does maintain a certain personality with that so that the person opposite us can recognize who it is we're talking to. So because of that, they'll have their own wants, their own desires, their own kind of take on things that may not always be totally aligned to kind of the person that's sitting opposite us.
Yeah. Have you ever wondered if you have psychic abilities? Perhaps you get those strong gut feelings about things, or you just know when your best friend's about to call. Perhaps you're extremely empathetic and open to other people's emotions. Well, I'm pleased to say that you're not alone. We hear this on a daily basis, and that's why we're back with our next round of psychic development courses that we run 3 times a year. Whether you're completely new to this work or you have a bit of experience, there's something for everyone. In these 6-week live stream courses, you will uncover the skills required to build upon your intuitive and spiritual world. Places are limited and will go fast, so be sure to check out wellnessfoundry.co.uk/courses to find out more and book your place. I think when you have a really good reading with a medium, though, it's pretty impressive.
Oh, it's amazing.
Because I just want to tell, I had a session with somebody in training who brought through a friend of the family who had passed pretty tragically at a reasonably young age. And the level of description that she brought through, about this person's appearance, about where the family was at the time, about what was going on, about his mental health, about lots of different things. And then also in terms of what was happening to their soul. It was just, had me in tears. It was just when you get that kind of strong connection, I think that stuff blows you away.
Totally.
It is so amazing. And as much as I can bring spirit through, and like you've said, I can recognize if I've got somebody there with me and I can kind of describe them. I don't feel I've got to that level with my mediumistic work yet where I can...
think that's bullshit.
Really?
I think that's absolute bullshit. I think that's a rhetoric you've told yourself. Because you sometimes come off readings go, oh my God, I got their dad's name. I got how they passed. I got that there was a tension within their relationships.
I just don't feel like there were... I would love to delve deeper into that, and maybe that will...
I think that's a you thing. I think that's a limitation that you've placed there. And I think I had to kind of lift that barrier at one point. And I remember saying to our tutor, I don't think I'll ever be a great medium. And he was like, what are you talking about? That's absolute bullshit.
Because I do feel like there's a prestige. It's like this... I know it sounds awful, but it's like it is a bit easier to be a psychic. And then if you feel like that,
I agree with that.
You have really nailed your work as a medium, I feel like that's that stamp of approval of you are working with spirit, like stamp kind of thing. And I just wonder where
that's not always what people need.
And I'm contradicting myself, I know, because I've talked about it very differently at the beginning, but it's just, I suppose as we're chatting this through, I'm just processing some of this stuff as well and processing some of my belief systems around it. And you're right, people don't always need that. Often people are there wanting reassurance.
I'm the worst person for a medium to sit in front because I've not really lost that many people. I didn't know most of my grandparents. I've, thankfully, touch wood, I've been in a situation where I haven't really lost that many people that are close to me. So I'm an absolute piglet when it comes to mediumship. I'm kind of much more there for the psychic messages. That said, when people... what's interesting is actually through mediumship sittings, I have developed a much, much closer relationship with my paternal grandparents than I would have done ordinarily, because I never met my dad's dad ever. But actually, he's come through in so many sittings. It feels like I have started to develop a relationship with him. So that's been enriching for me and beneficial for me. But no, I think this idea of you know, and again, I had to kind of unpick myself from that rhetoric of, I'm not kind of very good at this, because I brought people through in quite vividly at times. It is harder because there is a much clearer reference point. You know, if you say to somebody, oh, your grandfather was very tall, and they go, no, he was really short, it kind of belies the credulity straight away. But one thing I want to say to those that are getting a mediumship sitting is don't necessarily go with a very fixed idea of... I remember one time I was in training and somebody said, I've never met a medium that's impressed me because when my father was dying, I said, say a secret word when you passed over. And I was just thinking, that's not how this works. And again, it's like, partly we're having a conversation with that person. So, you know, you and I, Jamie and Fiongal, can meet somebody and you like that person and I dislike that person. And we could have a conversation afterwards saying, oh, I found them really abrasive and rude and annoying. And you could go, hang on a second, I thought they were lovely. I thought they were really lovely and kind of humorous and rambunctious. And that does not mean that one of us has understood that person and the other one hasn't. That is just our reflection and our interpretation. So that's also part of the complication, is that it's how that person is responding to me. And I've sometimes had spirit come through going, oh, I don't like your tattoos. Oh, I don't think, you know, they can be actually quite critical. And I don't kind of like them all that much.
And depending, I suppose, on their personality, they can come forward quite strong, because you will get the people that come forward chatting a lot, and you'll get people that you'll know they're there, but they're not really saying anything. So you're having to go like, well, come on, what are you here for? I know you're here, but give me something.
Do you know what I think is the large factor in that? And the more I work mediumistically, the more I realise that if people are quite spiritual in their living life, and when they were here on Earth, they find that communication part so much easier. They come along and go, oh, okay, oh, this is fun. Oh, hello, how are you? They're much more kind of at ease in the thing. And again, that's the thing that always steadies my course when I'm on my spiritual path, because I'm thinking, okay, there's something in this, because all of those that were spiritual in their living life find this work much, much easier. It's funny, actually, because my mum, I've given her quite a few readings. She often found the mediumship the more challenging part, actually. And I think that's quite common. People kind of accept the psychic side, but
they're a bit scared of the medium side.
Or just really skeptical. They just think, I have... And I think that's a lot of that is born by that sad thing of there's quite a lot of rhetoric in the media of charlatans or people trying to manipulate people that are emotionally vulnerable. You get a lot of those... there's a bit of a running theme in terms of mediums are actually just people that are taking advantage of people. And I think it's a real shame because the reverse, the other side of that isn't often shown. And I think a lot of healing can come from kind of medium. And again, the most important part, and this is something that was always drilled into us, is, okay, it's great to have that. I've got your granddad here. He was short. He had brown hair and he worked as a baker. Yes, okay, I know exactly who you're talking about. Yes, that's my grandfather. That evidence is really, really essential. But the most important part, and the thing that we're always told, is what's the message? Look for the message, because that's often where the healing comes in.
Yeah, it reminded me of a sitting I had a few weeks ago as well, where a name came through, and I do get a lot of names, and I've been tried to be confident with saying them because it's something that I'm fortunate to be given. Sometimes they land, but sometimes they don't. Most of the time they do, and I had this very strong sense of a man with me, like a father figure, and I said this name, and this person just burst into tears, and it transpires that it was her paternal father who she'd never met. And she was just so shocked because she'd never met them, never really had a relationship.
Paternal grandfather or father?
Father.
Right.
That she'd never met. Was so shocked that he'd come through on both. I suppose she was expecting, I think, a stepfather to come through or perhaps a grandfather. But this person that she'd never met. And I think that for her, I saw her get this feeling of, he did love me. And it just, I got the sense that shifted something for her. And I actually got the sense, and I said to her, it's funny, he's almost trying to make up for his time in spirit as being your father.
This is such an important point. It's such an important point that process of healing does not stop when somebody passes over.
Yeah.
100%. You can carry on chatting to them. You can offer them forgiveness. You can ask for answers. That process of healing does not, and this is something that has become so pronounced for me since doing mediumship work, is actually you can continue to do that work despite them. It's like their consciousness is still here just because they're physically not here. You can very much kind of still
because I got the sense that there was a sadness about not having a relationship with this person, but all of a sudden it was like I'd given this person the opportunity to have a relationship with them, and it was just utter shock and disbelief, but as well like gratitude that person is.
It's the same with my grandfather. It's the same with my paternal grandfather. Is that I didn't get a chance to ever meet him, so actually I feel that I've got that little bit more of a connection. And the other thing that's always surprised me of mediumship that I found deeply fascinating is how it's usually always ancestors. Not exclusively. Sometimes it is friends. Sometimes it is kind of past partners or whatever it is. But why I bring that up is that familial bond is so strong.
Yeah.
So strong. And it's often like, even if they are people that I haven't met, in case my grandfather, he will still come through. He is still invested and interested in my life. So again, this really is what points to me that those familial bonds are so important to maintain, as much as you feel that you are outside of that family tree and outside of that family lineage. For whatever reason, energetically and on a spiritual level, you're not. they are the people that will step forward.
Well, I suppose blood, they're saying blood is stronger than water.
Thicker than water, yeah.
Thicker than water, and a bit like in a past life regression, there's just this strength and bond that comes through that you can't separate yourself from. So it's funny, and it does remind me of past life regressions in that sense that we are reliving things because we are still, and I often get the sense that they are reliving something that's doing the work of an ancestor as well. So it's like they're carrying on this work. It's like it might not have been your thing, but you're almost having to continue this work through the bloodline, and that's how it's working. And I get that sense in PLRs all the time.
And that as I say, that realization only came through working mediumistically and bringing that forward. It's really odd because they might not have necessarily met them, but their interest in helping the person sitting opposite me is pronounced and it's palpable. Yeah. So I would say always call on that assistance because it is there at your fingertips, really.
Hi, can I ask you a quick favour? Can you just hit the subscribe or follow button on whatever platform you're using? Did you do it? Go on. No time like the present. Unless you're driving, of course. Hands on the wheel. The more people subscribe to our channel, the more we can keep delivering you the content that you're asking for. And we absolutely want to carry on doing it because we love it. So if you haven't already, please, please, please hit the subscribe button and continue with us on this journey. We really appreciate each and every one of you for tuning in and have so much more we want to share. Now, back to this week's episode.
I remember, because I also draw portraits of spirit as well. And there's been a couple of amazing times of that. I remember drawing somebody's husband once who'd passed over. That was uncanny because she sent me the photograph afterwards, and it was like you could hold them next to one another, and it was exactly the same with somebody's great grandfather. It was like she sent me a photo afterwards, and it looked as though I'd drawn directly from this photograph. Right. Wow. Absolutely nuts. And then there was this one time, I think I mentioned this on the last podcast of last series of somebody coming to sit opposite me, and they wanted me to tune into their spirit guide, and I drew them, and she showed me the drawing that she had done. Oh, and that's again, right. They were identical. It was really that was kind of. It is interesting how this part is often where people get the sniffiest. They're the bits that they almost roll their eyes, or they're kind of so disbelieving of, or they almost think you're a mug or a fool to believe in this side of things. It's odd, and it's odd because this part has never scared me. I've never felt any fear about communicating with the dead, which is basically what we're doing, right? I think there's a bit of a misconception around being a medium is like, do we see...
You're seeing walking ghosts the whole time.
And that's just not the truth, because we, again, we put our taxi light on when we want to do that and switch it off when we don't.
But it's not... But also to explain to people... From my perspective anyway, it's like you don't see things in the same form as you see somebody in real life when you're having a connection with spirit, do you? I mean, maybe some people do get physical forms, and I think depending on where you are, I know in the College of Psychic Studies, the energy in there is sometimes crazy, and I know that you've said you've actually seen a physical form, and there's been occasions where it's happened, but more often than not, it's a
mental projection.
It's a mental projection, or a feeling, even a feeling, or a sense of somebody through like a smell, or I don't know. It's
a little bit like if you weren't in the room and somebody came in and they said, "Describe Jamie to me," I would probably say, "Okay, he's got brown eyes, he's got a slightly long nose, he's got kind of." You would start describing that from a mental image, and that's kind of what we're doing that's probably the closest reference point that I have. It's not that we're kind of physically seeing them with our eyes, we're kind of seeing them with our spiritual eye, I suppose, and then relaying information that way. So that's kind of one mystery, but it is often the thing as well that puts people off when they have an intuitive sense or an intuitive gift. I know a lot of people that have spoken about when I was younger, I used to see kind of ghosts, or I would feel them near me, or, you know, I would try to sleep and they would enter my room and all of that stuff. And I know that, and this is part of the problem of it not being more widely known or spoken about, is that if people were experiencing these things, it would be normalised and go, okay, yeah, no, we know how to deal with that, how to approach that, because it's really common.
Yeah,
really
I had it.
common.
I had it as a child. I mean, I was always having a sense of other things around,
and it's,
always.
Oh, don't be silly, you're just imagining it, don't worry, it'll go.
Or even worse, it's like, even worse, it's kind of made fearful. You're made to feel fearful about it, and like, this is scary and you should push it away.
Exactly.
So that we've learnt that behaviour, haven't we? That if that comes into our existence, it's like, no, you must shut that down.
Exactly. And I think this is one of the only reasons that I found mediumship very kind of not easy. I find it challenging within the sittings, necessarily so, but in terms of, that's why I've never had any fear about it, because I've never had those experiences as a child. And I've never communicated, even with spirit, that I've kind of gone, ooh, okay, that's a bit more difficult or a bit more challenging or a bit more kind of unsavory. I've never felt scared, ever. I think that's the big, and so what I would say is, for those that have had those experiences, please know that you can enter back into this world without the same thing happening. If you go under the proper training and the proper mentorship, you'll be shown the tools in order to kind of maintain those healthy barriers so that you feel in control of it. It does not feel in control of you, because it is a kind of real wealth and a real resource. And that's often what gets overlooked, is that a lot of the evidence, a lot of the focus comes on the evidence of, oh, I've got your aunt here and her name began with D. Oh no, it began with E. And that kind of suddenly undermining that, becoming the kind of point of ridicule. Or it's the thing that everybody focuses on. And actually the most important thing of the mediumship side is actually the messages and the healing and the reassurances you said, and those kind of, and there's something unique within mediumship, because it is often the only time that we get to have those conversations, really, or there is that kind of conduit. We act as a conduit through, and as you say, I've witnessed real healing occur within my sittings because of it. And
someone said to me in a sitting the other day, I was reading for another medium at the college, and really lovely compliment, but just saying that it's funny because I do try and bring evidence through. I think that's the training we've had, and I think it's important, but I'm trying not to get hung up on it. And I think she said to me, even without the evidence, the emotion that you were bringing through was so on point that I just knew where I was. It just made complete sense. The way you were talking from this sense of knowing this, but this emotional state, that gave me the confidence to know that this was going right. And I think that's the other thing, is that sometimes what we're saying is one thing, but how we're saying it and how someone is energetically receiving that is a whole other thing. You know, just sitting in someone's energy, you know, and luckily enough, I've been told again, sometimes just sitting and chatting with me and having these conversations does some form of healing, which is an amazing thing to be told. And I don't really understand what I'm doing. I'm just being myself. I'm just talking and letting spirit talk through me. But to have someone say that there's a sense of healing that's come through without me doing that much, I'm not even saying that much, but there's some exchange. There's something that's going on that makes this person go away feeling lighter or better.
Well, partly I think that's on many levels. We're creating sacred space when we're creating sittings. Often we can overlook that and we're just doing the work. But actually, I think there are energetic shifts. We are creating this energetic kind of sanctuary in some ways. I think, again, the same happened today. We had a client call up, or a person call up on the work number, just wanting to ask some things. And she said, oh, actually, I feel so much better. Just even 5 minutes just chatting with you. And we weren't even in the sitting. I was just kind of talking her through stuff. And sometimes I think it's just about that recognition and feeling seen, I think, is really, really important. And again, that thing, particularly with mediumship, is reminding people that they're not alone within situations. I think even if people have loved ones, or if they have kind of a partner, or if they have children, or they've got really good friends, it can still feel lonely at times. And I think that reminder that there is resource and there is support that is kind of extends beyond just what is directly in front of us can also bring an enormous amount of comfort. And what I would say to people, if they're thinking, well, how do I generate that conversation or that connection or that communication with past loved ones? Just chat to them. Just speak to them. I was going to say as though they were there. They are there. If we call them in. And again, if you're in having a sitting, what I've started to do, which I've never done before, and I think this is again why my mediumship has ramped up, is in the beginning bit with my clients, I used to get them to set an intention for the sitting. So that would often be, okay, I'm at a crossroad with work, or I'd love some clarity around my path, or whatever it might be. And now I've included invite through anybody that you want to communicate with. And I think them setting that intention really helps anchor that energy and really brings forward. And then I usually within that moment, I feel a shift. And then I go, somebody's here. Somebody's stepped forward.
That's a really good point, because that's what I do. If I'm going for a sitting and I want my dad to come through, for example, in my meditation at the beginning, I will ask him to come forward and I will connect with him and I'll say, I really want a message, please come forward. And then 9 times out of 10, he does.
Exactly. So if you're going for a reading and you particularly want to hear from somebody, set that intention. On the flip side, if they don't come through, please don't be crestfallen. It's the difficult part of mediumship is that it can kind of look like we've got a telephone and we're dialing up. And so in some ways it can be like that. It can be that straightforward. But I know there have been times that people have looked a bit dejected or a bit saddened that their mother didn't come through, or a particular person that they wanted communication from. I want to say, don't be disheartened by that. There are usually a couple of things going on. One, it might just be us, that we're not the right medium for that time. We're not the right communicator for that time. It's like your mum kind of doesn't feel comfortable with me, or I won't express what your mum's trying to say in the right way. So it can just be that. It can also be that it's just not the right time, that they're dealing. Sometimes the thing we overlook is when you cross over, there's a lot of work to be done that side for them as well. So that there's just things going on that way. We tend to say leave it around at least 3 months before you try and communicate with somebody that's passed. I think 3 months is a minimum. Ideally, I would leave it about 6 is usually the kind of advice that I give people. Yeah. It was really strange. One of the readings that really sticks out in my mind is a client that came through, and it's difficult without going into specifics. Yeah, thank you. They had somebody pass over that I didn't recognize in the reading at all. I brought through somebody else very, very clearly. All the evidence was tick, 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 tick. And then I suddenly dawned on me, hang on a second, has this particular person passed over? And they replied saying they passed over yesterday. And I was so grateful to the spirit that stepped forward, who wasn't the person that passed over the day before, because the person who passed over the day before was just going, what's going on? Like, it was still kind of acclimatizing to that situation. But the person that stepped forward, who turned out to be the person that passed over's father, sorry, I know it's a bit generic, but I'm trying to make sure that there aren't details there. He was the one that was giving all the evidence, giving the reassurance, and giving evidence of the other person that passed over, so that my client could recognize, okay, they're there too. That was a real turning point in my mediumship work, because I thought, okay, this is. It was so on the nose, and it was so needed at that exact moment, because this client had booked in about a month before. They didn't even know that this was going to happen at the same time. So it was obviously divinely timed. I wouldn't normally recommend somebody books in that close to an emotional turmoil like that, but it was just everything aligned that I was able to offer some real reassurance about that kind of that passing over.
And I suppose sometimes the other thing is if they're not coming through, or that evidence isn't coming through, it might be just that there are different messages that need to come through that day. There's more pressing things.
Yes.
There's something that spirit or psychically you just need to be told.
Well said.
You know? It might be that there's a dangerous situation, there's a relationship, there's a job, there's something that just needs more attention. And I think as much as hard as that is, it's like what the recipient wants to know isn't always the same as what they need to know.
Yeah, exactly that.
Good. Okay.
Well, I'm going to pull a card on what spirit has to say about mediumship.
And what spirit has to say about spirit.
And what spirit has to say about spirit. That is a good way to phrase it. I like that. Ooh, it's a good one. It's the Six of Swords. Six of Swords. I always see the Six of Swords as one interpretation of it is Kronos. I think it's Kronos over the river Styx or Styx, I believe, Styx, the river Styx, who is the ferrier of the souls from the land of the living to the land of the dead, and he takes them across. One thing that was, I will get back to that in a moment, but one thing that was said when you said, oh, let's get spirit to talk about spirit, and they kind of said, well, spirit is everything. Everything has our spirit. Spirit permeates through every aspect of life, even those things that we assume don't have spirit do, in terms of a coaster, a table, all of that. It permeates through every aspect of life. So when we start to see ourselves as separate from that or different from that, that's where we start falling into trouble. And this idea that because the kind of physical aspect of something has disappeared, that suddenly the very essence of that thing would suddenly scatter and disappear is kind of ludicrous in some ways. What they're saying to me about this, coming back to Kronos and the ferryman that takes the souls over the river Styx, it's interesting with the Six of Swords because you see there is a ferryman with a pole that's carrying a child and what appears to be a mother and some six swords, and they're moving away from the calmer waters into steadier waters. And what spirit are saying is, in that final passage, don't be weighed down by regret. Don't be weighed down with resentment. Don't be weighed down. Don't carry unnecessary baggage with you, because that will make your journey across to the other side even more cumbersome, even more weighted, even more... They're saying you don't suddenly jettison all of these grudges, resentment, upset, frustrations. They don't just suddenly evaporate. They are taken with us and they are carried across with us when we go to the other side. So the lighter we are able to make our load this side, the easier it will be. Deep.
Great. Great. Makes sense, right? We are here to do the work. If we don't do the work,
we just keep
coming back with the same baggage. Yeah,
exactly that. Thanks, Spirit. Thank you, Jamie.
Thank you.
And that's the end of this week's episode. We'd love to hear what you think, or suggestions of what we could cover in future. Either leave us a comment if the platform you're listening on allows it, or drop us an email, hello@wellnessfoundry.co.uk. Alternatively, DM us on Instagram. Be sure to hit subscribe or follow to stay up to date with the latest releases. But until next time, love and blessings.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode of Spirit Level, brought to you by the Wellness Foundry, the home of spiritual wellness. For more information and bookings, visit the website wellnessfoundry.co.uk or find us on Instagram at Wellness Foundry. Don't forget, as a thank you for listening, receive 5% off your first booking by using code PODCAST5 at checkout. Terms and conditions apply.